Spoilers for the Scott Pilgrim comic, movie, and game. Scott Pilgrim is one of those franchises that you either love or you hate. I personally don't fall on either side of the fence. As for the comics, I liked them quite a bit. It's one of those works where it's not necessarily the main character that's likable, but the world around him, because Scott's not a very good person. I think the movie's okay for what it is despite its issues. I really like this song, and there's a reason I'm going to be talking about the game in question today. Beat 'em ups as a genre are a general favorite of mine. If they're executed well, I will absolutely play them over and over. It's a very secret sauce you have to concoct to make the game fun if you're developing one. You can't just program a basic punch or kick and fill the screen with enemies to instantly win people over. There's several factors into making the combat fun and the overall game fun as well, so does this game do just that, or is it another movie-based cash grab from a sleazy AAA publisher? This game had a very interesting development history, and I recommend this video here if you want all the specifics. But to put it short, Ubisoft Montreal was given the task of making the game, and with only 5 months left in development, they sought the help of Ubisoft Chengdu, only for Montreal to basically run out of the door without even leaving money for child support, and for Chengdu to find out that most of the game wasn't done. This definitely shows in the final product, and I'll go over the specifics when we get to gameplay, but it's honestly a miracle the game turned out the way it did. But for the sake of clarity, I'm going to point out that I'm going to be talking about the 2021 port of the game done by Who Cares. Anyway, despite the name of the game and Universal's logo being on the branding, calling this a movie-based game is definitely a bit of a stretch. The movie made quite a few changes to the story since the books weren't even finished by the time of its release, and this game actually features quite a few comic-exclusive characters. This is definitely a strange example of a tie-in game barely following the movie's marketing whatsoever. The only other example I can really think of is that Grinch game on PlayStation. I never thought I'd be making that kind of reference, but here we are. No, I'm not making a review of it. They probably used the movie's name to piggyback on its success. Bruh. I guess Ubisoft wasn't happy with the returns, as it was delisted in 2014 due to them not bothering to renew the license, and it never saw a physical release until the 2021 port of the game, in which Ubisoft outsourced it to limited run games. I could go on and on why limited run doesn't care about preservation, charges extra for a proper shipping box, encourages scalping, takes too long to ship, treats customers poorly in their support, takes Twitch donations and subs despite being a wealthy corporation, and even did a bait and switch with the release of Sheer the Wanderer by supplying a download code despite promising a CD! But others have made videos describing that way better than I ever could. Anyway, after the initial delisting, the only way to get the game was if you had an account with the game already purchased, or stole money from the starving indie devs at Ubisoft and pirated it onto a modded console. Fans celebrated when the 2021 port was announced, but let's be real, it's gonna get delisted again anyway. Man, it's amazing that the modern gaming industry is pushing for an all-digital future that limits real ownership and deletes games from public access due to corporate infighting. Seriously, it's fantastic! The library isn't on fire, what are you talking about? But let's talk about the actual game itself. Would I recommend you give it a go? Visually, the game is eye candy. This was another case of hopping on the trend of pixel graphics back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, but this game specifically ages gracefully in that department. These sprites are really good, and the character animations are top-notch. The levels are very nicely detailed, and they even hit a few Easter eggs in the background. Speaking of which, the levels themselves are varied and memorable. You start at the snowy streets of Toronto and go to a sunny movie studio, a Japanese restaurant populated by ninjas, that's not racist at all, a dark depressing forest near a cemetery with a serious zombie problem, to the final area in Gideon's techno base. There is a cutscene after every level, but they fit the definition pretty loosely. They're all just a still image with very few animations. Most of them are just various shots of Scott and Ramona making out. They're fun to look at the first time, but you can't skip them on repeat playthroughs, so good thing they're short. Now, if you notice some strange artifacts like slowdown and other graphical corruptions, that's unfortunately the fault of the garbage PC port of the game. There is several layers of DRM that clog up your computer's resources, and the cost is game performance. It's one of those PC games that uses the infamous de novo that nobody fucking likes, and it also uses this thing called VM Protect, which, hold on, let me look this up real quick. Okay, apparently it prevents the game from launching on a virtual machine? That's just fucking mean. Whoever developed that DRM, I hope you win the lottery and get hit by a car right after you cash it. But yeah, the PC port's DRM bogs down game performance, which is unacceptable for a computer like mine with the following specs.
It's amazing what we can do with computers these days.
So I honestly recommend you get one of the console versions, and I rarely say that about any game. I'm using the PC version to get footage, but I've clocked most of my time into the Nintendo Switch version, which runs great. Can Ubisoft do anything right? Next, let's talk about the very thing that makes a game worth playing, and that's, well, gameplay. The game is a beat 'em up, go figure, with up to 4 players if you actually have friends. There's light and heavy attacks, blocking and dodging, and a super that takes away some of your gut points. These are basically used to revive you after you lose all of your health if you still have some, instead of taking away a life. They can even be used to summon Knives Chow, which does something different depending on which character you're playing as. My favorite knife summon is Kim's because they make out and all the enemies get disgusted on screen. One more thing you might discover by complete accident is Hyper Mode, or at least that's what I call it. The manual calls it In the Zone. Hyper Mode activates briefly when you defeat 5 enemies in a row without taking damage. It basically turns you into a Steven Universe fan when someone draws a character slightly thinner than normal. You move faster, attack faster, and if you get an enemy in a jab lock, you force them into an infinite, which is basically a button mashing minigame. It doesn't take too much time to kill them after this, so just don't take any damage or else it ends very quickly. Scattered throughout the levels are items you can pick up that vary in size and can help you out in combat. Small items like bricks or baseballs are about the same as a normal attack, but they can be thrown like the other items can. Larger items like trash cans, basketballs, stools, or even fallen enemies hit harder but are a bit slower. Long objects are the holy grail. They're basically full-on weapons. Baseball bats, brooms, golf clubs, swords, you name it. They have the most range and are definitely the most useful type. But all of these become monstrous after getting to level 14 where they all attack extremely fast. There's a shop system in the game with some RPG elements attached. There are 4 main attributes to your character: Strength, Defense, which is spelled the British way in the manual by the way, Willpower, and Speed. Increasing Strength is self-explanatory, you hit harder. Increasing Defense makes you take less damage from attacks and makes it less likely for you to get stunned. It also increases your max HP. Increasing Willpower makes supers more damaging and increases your max gut points. Finally, increasing Speed makes you move faster, attack faster, and get up faster. There's an XP system, but it has nothing to do with any of these.
What?
Your XP and level are only increased by consuming food items and dealing damage, and leveling up gives you a new attack and replenishes all of your health right then and there. Back to the shops, you can find at least one in each level, with some being more open while others are essentially hidden. You buy consumables from these using money earned by defeating enemies and breaking certain objects. There are 3 types of items: snacks, meals, and accessories. Snacks and meals both heal you but with different properties. Snacks can be consumed immediately as well as stored portably, and they activate after losing all HP. This means you can essentially lose your health 3 different times before a life is taken away if you have a snack as well as extra gut points. Meals can only be consumed immediately upon purchase, but they heal a much larger amount most of the time. Accessories don't heal or give gut points, instead opting to give you way more stat points than any food item. They usually cost significantly more money than food, but the results speak for themselves. Each accessory levels up either a specific stat or a little bit of several, so make sure you know what you're buying. Which leads me to my first complaint. None of the shop items have descriptions. Oh wait, they do, but they're not helpful in the slightest. They usually have some quirky text saying how, oh, this food is delicious. Or if it's an accessory which could really benefit from a description, it's always something like, this music is so deep, or did you know that Bud Doyer committed suicide on live TV after his final speech? You never know what you're buying on your first playthrough, and by the time you find out what it is, it's too late and you already spent your money. Second complaint, the game doesn't teach you any of this. You pick up coins not knowing there's a store, and the stores themselves aren't obvious. Some of them blend right into the background, and the buildings you can enter don't even look like you can enter them. A glowing door or a sign would definitely help here. I had no idea about these stat mechanics until much later in the game. I knew about the stores and food items, but not the stats. The only tutorials in the game are when you level up and it flashes your new move on screen. This is probably why the game is rejected by so many of those who try it. They're turned off by the beefy enemies and low power level of the base characters, and the game doesn't even make an attempt to let you know about any of this. There's a good amount of information in the manual and in the how to play section of the main menu, but the game should teach you this by default. People shouldn't need to read the manual.
Read, nigga! Read!
Imagine if Doom Eternal didn't teach you about runes, weapon mods, crystals, or suit perks, instead just opting to toss you a new gun every now and then while the game just murders you because you didn't know about those upgrades. Most people wouldn't keep playing that if the game didn't give detailed tutorials about them. Most people aren't going to play a game they keep sucking at over and over to find out some hidden mechanics that make the game awesome once you take advantage of them. This is a major design flaw if you ask me. Third complaint, the game doesn't refill your lives and health after you finish a level. This is a problem because you can enter a brand new level on your last life with very little health, get hit a few times, die and get a game over, and continue at the exact same place with all 3 lives and full health and gut points. I get that you can obtain lives through certain shops, but there's only a handful of times in the whole game that even allow you to get extra lives at all, so you're mostly stuck with 3 max. Why not reset to 3 minimum lives each level unless you already have 3 or more? Wouldn't that make the most sense? I'm not even kidding when I say the best strategy is to game over on purpose just to go into the next level fully replenished. Fourth complaint, there's no checkpoints in the levels. Oh, there's checkpoints, but you don't respawn at them after you get a game over when you pass one. Instead, they're used to fast travel to the second part of a level after you beat it. I bitch about this because some areas go on longer than a season of Halo Infinite. Hey, come on! Take level 5 for example. It starts at the party, you go outside to the windows and balconies, you reach the roof where you fight the super fighting robot, then it goes to the dragon's den where you fight your way through until you reach the twins, beat them and you win. All of those areas you have to beat in one go and it goes on for about 16 minutes. It even shows the map after beating the super fighting robot, so why can't these be used as checkpoints or just make them separate levels? I don't mind the length of the levels. Believe me, I like Klonoa too, those levels can go on for 20 minutes even if you know what you're doing. But I feel like these levels should have had checkpoints to reduce frustration for newer players. One last complaint, this game has some strange glitches. Sometimes level 3 stops scrolling entirely, forcing you to restart the level. You can fight the twins behind their title card. Weapons hover next to your hand when you're actually holding them, you can take damage while inside a shop, sometimes you walk up or down past the intended play area, shop doors don't open if they're having a bad day, I could go on and on. This game can get pretty broken. This is probably a result of a shitty porting job as I didn't run into any of these in my PS3 playthrough, but it's a pretty jarring issue especially when you run into a bug that interrupts progress. Another strange thing I wanted to bring up, this game has the T for teen rating for a reason. Ignoring the gore on the zombies and the middle fingers, the developers were down bad when making this game. Almost every female sprite in the game has massive boobs and a round ass, with most of them jiggling after every movement. Ramona's outfit has her in short shorts, which made sense in the comics because there was a heat wave when she was wearing them, but the first level takes place in the middle of the fucking snow. They also gave Ramona the same honkers as most of the other women, and hey! Put your dick away. They also took a certain appreciation to Kim, using her ass as an attack and making her dodge animation a cartwheel so you can see her panties. They even gave the zombies boobs too. Look, I don't necessarily have a problem with any of this, I just think it's hilarious. Those Chengdu developers had to deal with the crunch somehow, I guess. But hey, at least they gave some love to the men too, check out Todd's bulge here. But how does the game actually feel to play? Well, great. Controls are very nice, and it's pretty satisfying to wipe out a group of enemies, especially a single player. Enemies get stronger as you progress through the game, so I recommend you regularly buy stat boost accessories every time you get a decent amount of money. You keep all of your money, XP, and purchases after you get a game over, so don't get discouraged. You can always go to a shop in a previous level after you die, and you keep all of the purchases you made even after you quit back to the map. There's 6 playable characters with a 7th being unlockable. You have the main 4 and 2 additional characters which were originally paid DLC on the Xbox 360 and PS3.
Gimme money, gimme money, gimme money, gimme money, gimme money.
But these have since been included for free in the 2021 port, more on that later. My personal favorite is Kim because I like her moves and animations the most. Her devilish expressions are great and she just shrugs off a pile of enemies. But I've decided to pick Ramona for this playthrough to mix things up a bit. The unlockable character is Scott, which you unlock after beating the game with the base 4 characters. Even though he's mostly a reskin of Scott with a few different moves, his animations are brilliantly edgy. He does the throat-cutting gesture and vanishes after finishing a level, both of which were taken from his boss fight in the forest. Each character even has different color palettes to choose from, which I don't really bother with most of the time, but with Scott, I love picking the one where his entire sprite is pitch black. You can definitely tell they were referencing Noob Saibot. Another thing worth noting is that the DLC characters, Wallace and Knives, are both reskins of Kim and Steven respectively. I'm not sure why they picked Wallace. He's already an NPC in the game and his player sprite is unusually buff because he's reskinned over Steven. And for some reason they made his original attire an alternate color while his default has a red shirt and jeans. Huh. But wait, Ubisoft decided to pull some fuck shit with the port and locked Knives behind a Ubisoft account sign-in. This means once those servers go down, and believe me, they will, Knives will be inaccessible without hacking or modding the game. The PC version includes her by default, but that's because you need a Ubisoft account and their client to play all of their games on PC, Scott Pilgrim included. Yes, even Uno requires an account for some reason. Why the fuck do I need a Ubisoft account to play fucking Uno? So if you're on console, you gotta make an account to play as Knives, and enjoy it while it lasts because this DLC will magically cease to exist as soon as the licensing agreement is up for renewal. Companies like Ubisoft outright forcing you to sign up for their crap to access content already in the game's files is an incurable cancer in the modern gaming industry. I say incurable because they have no incentive not to. It simply inflates their user numbers, leading to better statistics to please investors. But this specific case with Knives isn't even mentioned on the game's various store listings or even Ubisoft's own website. In fact, Knives and Wallace are a heavy part of the marketing with this re-release. A big selling point is that the paid DLC from the 360 and PS3 is included for free, and there's not even as much as an asterisk letting you know you have to sign in for Knives. Knives is even mentioned as one of the main playable characters and is featured on the box art. And no, the game doesn't tell you this either. You can go into the character select screen, and Knives isn't locked or blacked out or anything, she's just not there. I get that most people don't have a problem with connecting an account to unlock features in a game, but come the fuck on. This game is over a decade old, you advertise the DLC is included by default, and once those servers are gone, a selling point is gone too. Someone could buy a copy of the game years down the road after this theoretically happens, and it will, and something the game advertises in their face is just straight up missing with no explanation. This is just blatant disregard for customer satisfaction. Why does Ubisoft care this much about user number statistics that they're willing to shove their account integration into Scott fucking Pilgrim? A retro beat-em-up based on an irrelevant movie that bombed at the box office released over a decade ago isn't going to be played by people who have Ubisoft accounts. By the way, the limited run physical edition actually fixes this problem, so you don't even have to sign in with a Ubisoft account if you have a physical copy. You can just boot the game up and start playing as Knives. I'm lying, they didn't do anything. Forever physical my ass. Limited run is trash, everybody. Don't buy from them. Anyway, back to the game. As to be expected, each area houses a boss at the end. Most of the time it's one of Ramona's 7 evil exes, which basically makes this a domestic violence simulator if you're playing as Ramona. And for some reason the intro calls them the 7 evil ex-boyfriends.
Is that girl a boy too?
Yes.
There are a few exceptions though, like the super fighting robot, Mega Scott, or a secret fight with Knives' father, Mr. Chow. These bosses are actually pretty good for a retro-style beat-em-up game. Unfortunately, a lot of games in the genre suffer from bosses that rely entirely on arcadey cheapness. The bosses in this game, while they are pretty challenging, have hit stuns so you can combo or juggle them. All of the bosses have one thing in common: spectacle. Each boss's respective music track fits perfectly with the battle. Their attacks hit hard, adding even more pressure since you get sent back to the beginning of a level after you lose all of your lives. They could either ride a skateboard, summon different unique enemies, jump into a giant robot, or do whatever the fuck this is. And it feels excellent to finally beat a boss you've been having so much trouble with. It's your 5th or 6th playthrough of the level. You're on your last life, you're dodging the boss's attacks, trying not to take any more damage than you already have, the music swells up, the boss is rapidly flashing to signify that he's almost dead, and then you finally finish it off with a And that's the fucking meaning of life. About multiplayer, I've played it locally before, which is quite the fun time, but I only tried it online on the Switch and it's ew. I'm not sure if it's just how the Switch is with online games, but unless I'm the host, I have to deal with half a second of input lag. I despise input lag, so I hosted whenever I had the chance, but this game has great multiplayer. Single player is still fun, but co-op absolutely shines. My only problem is that a second player could join halfway through the game, but start with the base stats from level 1. They will not stand a chance against the shit the game throws at you later in the game, so if you're gonna play multiplayer, start a new save file. But how's online on PC? I can't tell you. I cannot find a single game. I've looked for ages at different hours of the day and in the middle of the night, and not a soul is playing the PC version online. I don't know if the player base between the Epic Games Store and the Ubisoft launcher are split or not, but it's a ghost town on PC, and there's no crossplay in this game. Not to mention, I can't find any mods for the PC version either, so I've come to the conclusion that the PC version sold like expired milk, probably because the only 2 places you could buy it are launchers nobody wants to use, and because of that, there's no Steam charts data for the player count. I'd definitely be singing a different tune if this game was on Steam or GOG. Normally I would gather footage of me playing online on the Switch, but not only can I not capture Switch games without buying an expensive capture device, but I would rather jam a rusty nail into my foot before I drop another $1 on Nintendo Switch Online. On to sound, there's no voice acting, but I really didn't expect that from a pixel beat-em-up. Since the game was already on a tight deadline, I doubt VAs were even in the question at all. Not to mention, I'm not the biggest fan of the movie's cast, so I'm kinda glad this game doesn't have voice acting. Sound effects are pretty simple. The landing of blows is relatively quiet, so it remains satisfying without getting obnoxious. But when it comes to the music, they absolutely hit it out of the fucking park. The soundtrack was done by a chiptune band called Anamanaguchi.
Anamanaguchi.
The style is hard to pin down, but it absolutely kills. The game's soundtrack is on iTunes and streaming services, so absolutely give it a listen. You got the sushi restaurant, which sounds like an old martial arts movie taken to a techno extreme. The forest level has a nice edgy vibe to it, almost sounding like something out of My Chemical Romance. Gideon's weird robot bass sounds like a lost song from a Mega Man game. Roxanne Richter's boss theme sounds like a fucking anime opening. And it's hard to describe the studio level style, but this song just makes me happy. It's great. The Dragon's Den right before you fight the twins sounds all traditional and Asian-like. But then you find out it's techno, just really distorted, and since they're seen at the computer right before the fight, it's almost like they were jamming out while you were on your way there and you were hearing it from the other side of the wall. I love attention to detail like this. Speaking of which, some tracks dynamically change as you get further in the level. The more you progress and the harder it becomes, the more intense the music gets. It really does a good job building up hype when you're about to approach a boss. The sound design in this game is absolutely top tier. Scott Pilgrim also has a good amount of replay value to keep you coming back after beating the game. As stated before, you unlock a Nega Scott after beating the game with the 4 main characters. Each character has their own ending cutscene as well, so skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to be spoiled. Scott's ending involves Ramona leaving him, but he ends up with Knives, Kim, and Envy all at the same time, so he's all set. In Kim's ending, she hooks up with Knives and come on, this goes hard. The comics have one panel of them kissing while drunk and it's never brought up again, and the movie didn't feature this plot point at all, so something tells me the developers really shipped these two. Steven's ending has him get a deal with the band and a record label and they make a bunch of money. Ramona's is the only one that remotely follows the source material accurately, with Scott and Ramona walking through the portal holding hands. Some of them are pretty funny. Knives marries Scott, that's the ending, go home bye bye. Nega Scott takes over the world and enslaves everyone, and Wallace is sitting with a drink? There is no text to convey what happens. Did they run out of time to make an ending? After you beat the game, you can revisit all of the levels and grind until you max out all your stats. Max stats let you mow everyone down with ease. When fighting early to mid-game bosses with max stats, you will rip their fucking cock off. It's really cathartic to plow through a level as fast as you can with little to no trouble. So that's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This game is just great. The combat is fun, the music is phenomenal, the bosses are tough but fair, the pixel art holds up extremely well and is fun to look at, and the multiplayer is just something you need to experience for yourself. And the best part is, despite the abundance of deep cuts and references, you don't even need to be a fan of the source material to enjoy this game. I actually read the comics and watched the movie after I played the game, and my lack of knowledge didn't make the game any less fun. Scott Pilgrim is an absolute blast, and after your first playthrough you'll want to play it over and over and over again. I always end up coming back to this game at some point just because of how fun it is. It took me a while to get the hang of the upgrade system, but other than that it's awesome. Would I recommend it if you like beat 'em ups? Absolutely.